So this is Star I. We'll start off with another quote. Sometimes the questions are complicated and the answers are simple. All right, so to begin us off, let's start with understanding what OBRA is. So OBRA is the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. It was passed due to reports of poor care and abuse in long-term facilities. It sets the standards for nursing assistants, including how much training they have, the competency evaluations, the type of training they go through. It requires the state to keep a current list of NAs in some sort of registry. It requires certain standards for instructors. It also sets guidelines for minimum staff requirements. It sets guidelines for the minimum services that can be provided. It requires resident assessments called MDS or minimum data set, and there is an example of that in page 22 of your textbook. It also requires that facilities complete your MDS within 14 days of admission, and again each year. A new MDS must be done when there is significant change, and it also identifies the resident's rights, which we'll talk about next. Why is it important to protect individual rights? Residents' rights relate to how residents must be treated while they're in a facility, and these rights provide an ethical code of conduct for the workers. Residents should receive a list of these rights, and it should be very detailed, and it will include some of the following points. Quality of life is the right to the best care available. It includes dignity, choice, and independence. Services and activities to maintain a high level of wellness. They must receive the correct care, and their health should not decline as a direct result of the facility's care. The right to be fully informed about rights and services. They must be told what is available and the fee for each, and receive a written copy of legal rights. Legal rights must be explained in a language they can understand, and residents must be given contact information for state agencies relating to the quality of care, such as ombudsmen, which we'll talk about a little later. So residents have the right to participate in their own care when it comes to planning their treatment, their care, and their discharge. Residents have the right to refuse their medication, treatment, care, and restraints. They have the right to be told about changes in their condition. They have the right to review their medical record, and informed consent. Informed consent is the process which a person, with the help of a doctor, makes informed decisions about his or her health care. The right to make independent choices. Residents can make choices about their doctors, their care, and their treatments. They can make personal decisions such as what to wear and how to spend their time. They can join in community activities, and that includes both inside and outside the facility. And it also allows for the resident council, which is a group of residents who meet regularly to discuss issues related to the long-term care facility. They have the right to privacy and confidentiality. Medical and personal information cannot be shared with anyone but the care team. They have the right to private, unrestricted communication with anyone they choose. They have the right to dignity, respect, and freedom. They cannot be abused, mistreated, or neglected. They have the right to security of possessions. Personal possessions must be safe at all times. They cannot be taken or used by anyone without the resident's permission. And residents have the right to manage their own finances or choose someone else to do it for them. Residents have the right during discharges and transfers. They need to know the location change, and it must be made safely and with the resident's knowledge and consent. There is a little bit more information on this on page 24 of your textbook. They have the right to complain. They can voice those grievances without fear of punishment. They have the right to visit. from doctors, family members, friends, clergy members, legal representatives, or any other person that they choose. They have the right with social services to have access to that, including counseling, assistance in solving problems, help contacting legal and financial professionals. Okay, so vulnerable adults. Some states may have vulnerable adult acts or adult protection services. These laws may vary by state to state, and some states may not have any. These laws protect individuals who need help from others because of physical or a mental impairment. It's important to know that NAs need to know their state laws where the NA is employed. Because some states may not have a specific law, the residents of long-term facilities are covered by the federal laws relating to residents' rights, which also forbid abuse and neglect and require reporting if these acts do occur. Rights of Individuals as addressed with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. It's on page 24 of your textbook. It prohibits discrimination because of a disability. It requires that schools, businesses, or employers offer equal opportunities. Must be able to get into and around buildings and use bathrooms, drinking fountains, and other areas. It requires new buildings to be accessible and old buildings to be updated whenever they are renovated. And it has the right to all services offered to the public. You must make reasonable accommodations to make these services available. Examples of accommodations are providing a large screen for a computer or allowing a service dog. Residents' rights continued. This will be on Elder Justice Act. This was passed as part of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. The law designed specifically to combat elder abuse. Under this act will be the Elder Justice Coordinating System and Advisory Board on Elder Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation. More information on that is on page 27. Residents' rights continued on voting. Even when you live in a care facility, you retain your legal right to vote. They can request and receive absentee ballots, or they might be driven to a polling place by a family member, a friend, or an employee. The NA should not discuss opinions even when asked about them, but they should be available to help if needed. For an example, if a resident cannot write due to an injury or arthritis or whatever condition is causing them from being able to hold a pen or a device, then an NA may have to assist them with filling out a ballot. But remember, the resident's vote is confidential and should not be shared with anyone. Okay, so dignity and independence. Residents are adults and should not be treated as children. NAs should encourage residents to do self-care, but don't rush them. It may take extra time, but we need to assure these people that we have the time to wait on them. They do not need to get discouraged by us seeming impatient. That goes back to the dignity and independence. If they feel like you're being impatient because they're not moving fast enough, that can make them feel like they're insignificant or they're doing a bad job, when in reality, they're just moving a little slower due to conditions that they may have. Residents may have the right to refuse care. Residents have the right to make their own choices about their care, and that's part of their independence. Residents' right continued. This is about the choices that they may make. The Patient Self-Determination Act was passed as an amendment to OPRA. It requires all healthcare agencies that receive Medicaid and Medicare funds to provide information about rights related to advance directives during admission or enrollment. Advance directives are legal documents that allow people to choose care if a time comes when they are unable to make those decisions. Living wills and durable power of attorneys are examples of advance directives. Living wills outline care a person wants or does not want in case he or she becomes unable to make those decisions. These take place take place when the person is still alive. They may be called a directive to physicians, healthcare declaration, or a medical directive. An example of this would be if you were knocked unconscious or if you went into a coma of any sort. If you had a living will, the healthcare providers would be able to look at that and see what choices that you wanted made with your care. Durable power of attorney for healthcare is sometimes called a healthcare proxy. It's signed, dated, and witnessed legal document appointing someone to make medical decisions for a person if they become unable to do so. Now notice this is only if they become unable to do so. A DNR is a do not resuscitate order. Medical personnel will not attempt CPR. It's a tool that helps medical providers honor their wishes about care. Okay, so some questions to consider as we move along. What is HIPAA? What is PHI? What's an EHR? What's HITECH? How do these things relate to patients' rights? Hopefully you'll have the answers to those by the end of this lesson. So HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. It was passed to help keep health information private and secure. Healthcare organizations and their employees can be fined and or imprisoned if they do not follow the rules to protect patient privacy. Under HIPAA, a person's health information is called PHI. All healthcare workers must follow HIPAA regulations no matter where they are or what they are doing. There's serious penalties for violating these regulations, and they may vary depending on the offense and the violation itself. It can be a fine or it can be prison. Prison sentences may be up to 10 years, and fines can range from $100,000 to $2,500,000. The protected health information examples include names, addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, email addresses, medical records, anything that has health information in it that would be considered private is covered under protected health information. Think of ways that you can respond without violating this right if someone wants to check on a resident. It could be an aunt, it could be a neighbor, anyone that is not the resident themselves. You might want to respond with, I'm sorry, but I can't share that information. It's private, or that information is covered under law protected by protected health information. However you want to respond, but be prepared because sometimes at some point in your career, you may encounter a situation where somebody is going to ask you something and you're not going to be able to tell them. And you need to have a plan on what you'll say to them in that case. Health information technology for economic and clinical health. It was created to expand the protections under the security of consumers' electronic health records, which is also known as the EHR. It increases civil and criminal penalties for sharing or accessing PHI. Confidentiality will be covered in greater detail on pages 20, 24, 30 through 31, 46, 49, 343, and 373. It'll cover such items such as customer patient information, HIV status, which is particularly important to keep confidential, computer information, mental illness rights. All of that will be covered under these textbook pages. So what's an ombudsperson? They're assigned by law as a legal advocate for residents that advocate for residents' rights and quality of care. They'll educate consumers and care providers, investigate and resolve complaints, appear in court and legal hearings, give public information, and work with investigators from the police and adult protective services and health departments to resolve complaints. You'll need to recognize, describe, and demonstrate how to document signs and symptoms of physical and emotional abuse and neglect. So NAs have a legal and ethical responsibility to observe for, signs, and report suspected cases to the charge nurse. You must follow the chain of command when reporting abuse. NAs are mandated reporters and can be convicted of a crime for not reporting knowledge of abuse or neglect. Mandated reporters are legally required to report a suspected or observed abuse or neglect because they have regular contact with vulnerable populations. Physical abuse is any treatment, intentional or unintentional, that causes harm to a person's body. Psychological abuse is emotional harm caused by threatening, scaring, humiliating, intimidating, isolating, or insulting a person, or treating him or her as a child. It also includes verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is use of spoken or written words, pictures, or gestures that threaten, embarrass, or insult a person. Sexual abuse is the forcing of a person to perform or participate in sexual acts against his or her will. This includes unwanted touching and exposing oneself to a person. It also includes sharing pornographic material. Sexual harassment is unwanted sexual advance or behavior that creates intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. Financial abuse is the improper or illegal use of a person's money, possessions, property, or other assets. And substance abuse is the use of illegal or illegal drugs, cigarettes, or alcohol in a way that harms oneself or others. And Chapter 20 has more information on substance abuse. Assault is a threat to harm a person, resulting in them feeling fearful that he or she will be harmed. Battery is intentional touching of a person without his or her consent. An example would be hitting or pushing a resident, but also another example would be forcing a resident to eat a meal. Domestic violence is abuse by spouses, intimate partners, or family members. Workplace violence is abuse of staff by other staff members, residents, or visitors. False imprisonment is unlawful restraint of a person, both the threat of being restrained and actual restraints. Not allowing a resident to leave the facility is another example of false imprisonment. Involuntary seclusion would be separation of a person from others against the person's will. Neglect can be either active or passive. Active neglect is purposeful failure to provide needed care, resulting in harm to a person. Passive neglect is unintentional failure to provide needed care, resulting in physical, mental, or emotional harm to a person. Negligence is actions or failure to act or provide the proper care for a resident, resulting in an unintended injury. An example, forgetting to lock the wheelchair before transferring a resident. The resident falls and is injured. So actions that will be taken if abuse or neglect are suspected comes from pages 23 through 28. The facility will first investigate according to its policies and procedures. If they determine abuse has occurred, a report will be made to the Nurse Aid Training Competency Evaluation Program. The NA will be notified of any complaint made about him or her to the Nurse Aid Training Competency Evaluation Program. The nurse aide can then request a hearing. The Nurse Aid Training Competency Evaluation Program will investigate and decide whether or not to mark in the nurse aide's record that he or she was abusive. Some states may have a separate abuse registry, or they may be together and just notated under the person's name. All nursing facilities must check the registry before hiring a nursing assistant. They will then be told if the abuse when they inquire. If the NA was placed on the abuse registry, he or she will no longer be able to work in a certified nursing facility. The potential malpractice and liability issues is covered on pages 24 through 27 of your textbook. Malpractice occurs when a person is injured due to professional misconduct through negligence, carelessness, or lack of skill. Ethical and legal issues are covered from pages 20 to 32 in your textbook. Ethics is the knowledge of right and wrong, and it's what makes us want to do the right thing. Laws are usually based on ethics, and when someone breaks the law, he or she may be punished with fines or imprisonment. Both ethics and laws protect people receiving care and guide people giving the care. More information on ethics is on pages 20 and 21. Your references with your textbook, your Hartman's Nursing Assistant Long-Term Care, the third edition.